Welcome back to Generation Rogue. We have some frustrating updates and some exciting ones. I'm sure so many of you were watching the inauguration. We'll be discussing and analyzing some important moments as well as some important movement as far as executive orders go, especially in terms of the pro-life movement, defunding Planned Parenthood, and getting back to hiring people based on merit. That's what's coming up on the show today. All right, so before we start talking about the atrocious speech given by Mariann Budde, I don't know if I'm saying that right, Bud, I don't know. I want to remind you that this is my new Rumble channel. If you were following my old one, that channel is no longer active. I will not be on it. All of my content will be on this channel from now on. And I have a full list of all of my active channels below so you don't miss out on new episodes. All right, so Mariann Budde is apparently a quote unquote bishop in the Episcopal Church, and she gave an inaugural sermon. Take a look at part of that speech.
Let me make one final plea, Mr. President. Millions have put their trust in you. And as you told the nation yesterday, you have felt the providential hand of a loving God. In the name of our God, I ask you to have mercy upon the people in our country who are scared now. There are gay, lesbian, and transgender children in Democratic, Republican, and independent families, some who fear for their lives. And the people who pick our crops and clean our office buildings, who labor in poultry farms and meat packing plants, who wash the dishes after we eat in restaurants and work the night shifts in hospitals, they may not be citizens or have the proper documentation, but the vast majority of immigrants are not criminals. They pay taxes and are good neighbors. They are faithful members of our churches and mosques, synagogues, wadara, and temples. I ask you to have mercy, Mr. President, on those in our communities whose children fear that their parents will be taken away, and that you help those who are fleeing war zones and persecution in their own lands to find compassion and welcome here. Our God teaches us that we are to be merciful to the stranger, for we were all once strangers in this land. May God grant us the strength and courage to honor the dignity of every human being, to speak the truth to one another in love, and walk humbly with each other and our God for the good of all people in this nation and the world. Amen.
Okay. So some people on the right are saying to try to watch one person's facial expressions and body language each time. So rewatch it and just watch one person. And I've got to say that's great advice. It just gets better and better. My personal favorite is JD Vance. He has a very Jim Halpert vibe from The Office, if you're not familiar. And Trump put out a statement on social media on the 22nd, 2 days later, in response to this. His response reads, quote, "The so-called bishop who spoke at the National Prayer Service on Tuesday morning was a radical left, hardline Trump hater. She brought her church into the world of politics in a very ungracious way. She was nasty in tone and not compelling or smart. She failed to mention the large number of illegal migrants that came into our country and killed people. Many were deposited from jails and mental institutions. It is a giant crime wave that is taking place in the USA. Apart from her inappropriate statements, the service was a very boring and uninspiring one. She is not very good at her job. She and her church owe the public an apology. I agree with what he said, and I'll explain why. On the other side of the aisle, though, lefties are posting pictures of this woman saying, "I stand with her, and she's so brave, and this is what Christianity really looks like." Ironically, this is coming from people who aren't Christian in most cases, but there's a couple of points I want to touch on this. Number one, female bishops are invalid. I don't care if it hurts your feelings. There's no such thing as a female bishop. So that right there, I mean, priest either, like Christian, whatever. There's no such thing as a female priest, bishop, whatever. Some Protestant churches, very liberal ones, think that that's okay, but it's really not. And again, I don't care if it hurts your feelings. It's just number one. Number two, putting aside her gender, even if a proper bishop, a man, were to say the things that she said, there would still be outrage. People aren't mad about the speech just because she is a woman, despite this suggestion that it was merely sexism. Of course, she wouldn't have been up there in the first place, which would have been nice. But let's say, just for argument's sake, that she was a man who made this speech. There would still be backlash, and rightly so. Because supposedly this is a Christian church, not an activist rally. It's neither the time nor the place to throw out baseless accusations about how Trump is harming gay or lesbian or trans kids and making them fear for their lives. It's ridiculous. Not only is it inappropriate, it's totally false. How is he making those individuals fear for their lives? I would love to know. Someone please explain this to me. In what way is Trump harming gay or lesbian or trans children? I'm guessing there are a few weak attempts at answering this. One is that, oh, well, Christianity should be about being kind to everyone because that's what Jesus taught. Like this woman was suggesting in her quote unquote sermon. Let me just break this down for you. The executive order that the government only recognizes two genders, for example, and actually the word gender is meaningless if it's not synonymous with sex. You know who else taught that sex is binary? Jesus. God. Let's take a little trip back to Genesis and Adam and Eve, shall we? So that can't be unchristian. So what else is there? Preventing men from competing in women's sports? Again, sex is binary, so can't be that. How about, quote unquote, preventing transgender care? This is an interesting one because if I ask someone on the left about this, they'll have some trouble clarifying when I ask if they are referring to chemical sterilization or mutilation of children, because that is what transgender care is. And this woman, this Mariann woman, is specifically referring to trans children. So if the problem is that you think it's unchristian to ban chemical castration and mutilation of children, I don't know what Christianity you're referring to, but it sounds more like Satanism to me. And if you're talking about the executive order that's so offensive about no longer flying gay or trans pride flags on government buildings, maybe just take a step back and think about how entitled you sound. Where are all the Latino pride flags or the Irish pride or the straight pride flags for that matter? The point of the American flag, just like the point of the United States national anthem, is about unity, not separation. And since when was flying a flag about sexuality appropriate to fly on government buildings in the first place? How ridiculous. And lastly, people claiming that Trump and his administration are unchristian and that this Mariann woman is so brave to stand up to him because of the quote unquote harassment faced by trans people. Again, no one can define this. What does that mean? Often, what people on the left mean by quote unquote harassment is when people refuse to participate in their delusions. And therefore, they feel they are being harassed, and it's unchristian in the eyes of these people who aren't even Christian themselves, by the way, to be anything other than kind and accepting of everyone. In case you forgot, Christianity is not a club. Its purpose is not to be accepting of everyone. Christianity is not about the acceptance and normalization of sinful lifestyles. Again, that's Satanism. Do what thou wilt. Christianity is about being more like God, recognizing sin, repenting of sin, encouraging others to do the same so that we can all go to heaven. Jesus did not teach to accept everyone. Oh, he ate with tax collectors and prostitutes. Yeah, and then they repented and fixed their lives and became his followers. He didn't just hang out with them like, oh, you're a prostitute? That's cool. You do you. I accept you if that's who you are. No. So those folks out there who are saying it's unchristian to not be accepting of everyone, they don't understand Christianity. And this Mariann woman is doing a disservice to Christianity by suggesting that as a figure of authority. It's really, really shameful. You know what else is shameful? Not taking care of your skin this winter. The heaters are on. We've got awful cold winds outside, and it takes a toll on your skin. Even if you don't have sensitive skin, it's super important to make sure your skin is moisturized and healthy. Amalo Tallow is where it's at. This is what it looks like. It comes in a little glass jar. This is their unscented. I've used like probably 3 jars of this so far. I just ordered 3 more for the rest of the winter. And they're a small family-owned company that is going back to the roots of skincare with all natural ingredients. Their unscented tallow, which is the one I use, it literally has 2 ingredients. It's tallow whipped with almond oil. So if you're anything like me and you have sensitive or acne-prone skin, this is an amazing product. It will not clog your pores. It balances the oils in your skin and helps you maintain a healthy skin barrier. They also have scented products using natural essential oils as well if you're into scents. They have soap, they have lip balm, all kinds of goodies on their website. Tallow is the past and future of skincare. Support this family-owned business and do yourself a favor by switching to healthy, non-toxic skincare. Your skin will thank you. Visit amalo.com/Kate. That's AMALLOW.com/Kate. So the next thing I want to talk about is Trump's executive order pardoning peaceful pro-life protesters. I made a video back in October, I think it was October, about how pro-lifers were feeling betrayed by Trump, saying he was in favor of IVF and he's personally in favor of early abortions for rape survivors. And a lot of the pro-life community was starting to kind of turn away from him as the election was approaching. And in that video, and I'll link it for you below, I went over some action items that Trump spearheaded that have really helped the pro-life movement. And basically just pointed out that it doesn't really matter what his personal opinion is. It matters how his presidency, what are his action items that he's actually doing to help the pro-life cause, to make America a more pro-life country. First of all, he appointed pro-life judges, conservative judges. The overturn of Roe v. Wade was huge. He was a major contributor to making abortion no longer federally protected and simultaneously giving more power to the people in individual states. It was amazing. And I was convinced that even though Trump is not 100% pro-life himself, because unfortunately, I don't think he would ever be taken seriously as a presidential candidate if he was 100% pro-life himself. But I believed that based on his track record, he was going to be a huge asset for the pro-life cause, especially next to Kamala Harris over there. It's not even a comparison, really. And here we see it again. 23 pro-life protesters were charged with violating Freedom of Access to Clinics Act because they were peacefully protesting outside abortion clinics, and people were offended. And the Biden regime charged them. Many were thrown in jail, including wife and mother Bevelyn Williams. All 23 of these people have now been pardoned by President Trump. Take a look at this clip.
Next, we have a set of pardons for peaceful pro-life protesters who were prosecuted by the Biden administration for exercising their First Amendment rights.
Do you know how many?
I believe it's 23, sir.
23 people were prosecuted. They should not have been prosecuted. Many of them are elderly people. They should not have been prosecuted. This is a great honor to sign this. They'll be very happy. So they're all in prison now.
Some are out of custody.
It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I agree, President Trump. It's a great honor to sign this, he says. What else is in the works? Well, it sounds like the new Trump administration has hinted that there will also be moves to defund Planned Parenthood. And by the way, for people still confused about why this is a good thing, when supposedly abortion only accounts for a small percentage of Planned Parenthood's services, I want to explain this breakdown because I feel like it's just going to keep coming up and it's just going to keep circling on social media, and people are going to defend Planned Parenthood because, oh, look at all these other good things they're doing. And, well, abortion's only 3% of their services. And, claim that by defunding Planned Parenthood, the Trump administration would be taking away all these other healthcare procedures from women. And there's this chart, of course, you've probably seen it on social media. It's from Planned Parenthood. It says their STI, STD testing and treatment accounts for 41% of their services, the largest percentage of their services, supposedly. Cancer screening and prevention, 10%. Other women's health services, not sure what that means. I'm sure there's a breakdown somewhere. Abortion services, 3%. Other services, 1%. And contraception, 34%. So I want to explain how they get the 3% figure. Planned Parenthood takes the number of abortions and divides it by the number of services. So, and then, by the way, you can find this on their website. I found a really helpful breakdown on Twitter myself, and then, researched it. So, they divide it by the number of services. So, if you have a list of services, pregnancy test, STI screenings, birth control, pap smear, breast exam. So, an entire abortion procedure, which is what a woman actually comes in for and runs anywhere between $400 and $1,500, is counted the same as a pregnancy test. Because when she comes in, she receives multiple services, and they're counting those all as the same. So if she gets 4 different services, they're like, oh, well, abortion was only 25%, even though she might have come in specifically for an abortion. They're like, oh, take a pregnancy test so we can, move around the percentages here. Oh, let's make sure you don't have any STDs. Oh, let's do a breast exam. All right, that's 4 with the abortion, even though she came in just for the abortion. So Planned Parenthood has 9.4 million services. All they have to do is divide that by 323,999 abortions, and you get 3%. So if a woman gets a pregnancy test, an abortion, an STI test, contraceptives, she gets, 4 services, and they're counting them all the same. You can get a pregnancy test at a gas station for like $2 maybe. They're super cheap. And an abortion, as I just said, costs way more than that, between $400 and $1,500, depending on where you are. Maybe it's more. So they're counting those two things the same, which of course is problematic, but point is that's how they're really getting this 3% number. Oh, it's only 3%. Oh, it's only, a fraction of our profits. So it's really all just smoke and mirrors. It's all bullshit. If abortion was only 3% of their services and only a fraction of their profits, they would have no problem, really, with the government defunding abortion. But they do. They have a huge problem with it because the percentage is actually much higher than that. So I think this is a great start for the Trump administration and for the pro-life movement over these next 4 years. If you would like to contribute to the pro-life cause, you need to start drinking 7 Weeks coffee. It's called 7 Weeks coffee because at 7 weeks, a baby is the size of a coffee bean. With each order of 7 Weeks coffee purchased, you will directly help fund over 1,000 pro-life organizations across the country. On top of their incredible mission, they source their coffee directly from farmers. They oversee every step of the process from planting and harvesting to processing and shipping, ensuring complete transparency and quality. So click the link in the description or go to 7weekscoffee.com and use promo code KATE for 10% off. So lastly today, I want to talk about this Equal Opportunity Act of 1965, which unsurprisingly, people on the left are claiming basically that it means a company can decide not to hire you just because you're a woman. First of all, Trump signed an executive order which revoked a previous executive order. He can't revoke an act of Congress. He would need the consent of Congress to do that. And that would be an overturning, not an executive order. Okay, so this is not the same thing as that. What the executive order he signed actually indicates is the removal of DEI hiring. So basically, you have to hire people based on their skills and their qualifications. Instead of having a certain number of boxes, you have to check for diversity and equity and inclusion. So instead of hiring someone because they're Black or because they're gay, Trump is saying you should be hiring based on merit, not race or identity or sexuality, because that was a stupid thing to do to begin with. I'm not really sure why this is controversial. Maybe people got so used to using their identity and victimhood as crutches over the last 4 years that they now realize they actually have to be qualified and be good at a job to get that job. Wow, crazy concept. The other thing that's funny about this is that you have modern feminists on Twitter screaming about how we've gone back to the 1940s and now women have no rights in the workplace, despite the fact that anti-discrimination laws are still in place and removing them was never up for debate or on the table at all. These are the same feminists, though, that claim that women make less money than men based on sexism. So if that's the case, my question is, if there's a wage gap between men and women because the corporate world is just so sexist and women are victims who just get unfairly paid less, why wouldn't companies just hire women? It would be cheaper, they would profit more, it would make sense. So you'd have nothing to worry about, even if something wild happened, like companies were suddenly allowed to not hire women simply because they're women. Those two things would negate each other because women would help the companies by making the companies more money because the company would just pay them less than men, right? But then again, how were they paid less than men because of sexism in the first place if this act was supposedly protecting them and was doing its job? Wouldn't that mean that men and women would need to be treated equally in the workplace, including pay? Obviously not if there's been a decades-long wage gap based on sexism. This could go around all day. It doesn't make any sense because there is a wage gap, but it's not based on sexism. The funny thing about the concept of a sexist wage gap is that it assumes that men and women are interested in the same industries and interested in the same things in life in general, which they aren't. So you can't actually compare wages because the industries men go into generally pay higher wages. They're riskier jobs, jobs with more demands, more overtime. Meanwhile, women dominate fields like nursing and teaching and social work. That's not to say that those jobs aren't hard or important, but a social worker definitely is going to make less money than a head bridge engineer. It's just a fact. The supposed wage gap also doesn't take into consideration that men and women have different priorities. When a couple starts a family, the woman is more likely to want to stay home, be the stay-at-home parent. She's more likely to take time off work, certainly for maternity leave, but also for when her child is sick. Women are less likely to want to work as much overtime as a man. Women are also less likely to ask for raises. There are tons of contributing factors as to why, on average, women make less than men. And pretty much none of them have to do with sexism. If you're trying to say, oh, well, women only stay home with their kid because of the patriarchy, you're just go touch grass. Go take a nap. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, yes, mothers tend to have motherly instincts and might want to be with their kid when their kid is ill. That's not the patriarchy. That's called nature. So maybe you should look into that. But I'd encourage you to look into this more. Genuinely, this wage gap thing, if it piques your interest. I think it's a really relevant topic since we still hear so much talk about sexism and women being paid less for the same role and the same amount of work. It's just not true. That's not to say that there aren't people out there who are sexist. Of course there are. But this eternal victim card is so tiresome and so fake, and it needs to stop. So, before we wrap up for today, don't forget about Heaven's Harvest emergency food kits. Not only are these great to keep around your house in case of a crisis, but they're also delicious. I have to keep myself from eating them because they're for emergencies only, not for a little snack, even though they're perfect for one. They're also great for camping, hunting, fishing, or any activity on the go. Their meals are packed in Mylar foil pouches that are resealable, which is NASA-grade packaging. It's moisture, UV, and radiation resistant, and their meals have a 10-plus year shelf life. Plus, they're made and packaged right here in the USA. In addition to their delicious meal kits, there's actually no better time to start getting ready for spring with Heaven's Harvest seeds. Stock up. Every fruit or vegetable you can think of in these resealable bags. You can plan your spring and summer harvest more effectively than ever. Plus, produce has gotten so expensive. It's ridiculous, and the quality is just not that good in a lot of places these days. There's something so fulfilling about being able to grow your own food and harvest your own produce at home. You know what I mean? It's nice. It's like we're getting back to traditions. So there's something for everyone. Stock up on seeds for spring and emergency meals by going to heavensharvest.com/Kate and use promo code Kate for 10% off. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. Please be sure you are following my current channels. I have my full list below so that you don't miss new content. Stay warm out there. Stay awake, stay curious, and I will see you next time.